Thought I'd capture our gardens before the frosts come. First one might be coming tonight. This is a small section of a new garden I built a couple years ago, and I thought I'd plant nasturtiums all through it, or in certain areas, and now it looks like they're all through it, as you can see, almost covering this 3-foot high cement Easter Island head. And then they wind up through this section of the garden. And we've got orange ones. I thought they were pretty well all the same in this garden, or I thought they were supposed to be pretty much the same. And then there's some yellowy ones. And over here we have some nice dappled pale yellow and peach orange color. Very nice now. They've reached this state. This summer was quite dry, so it took a while for a lot of these plants to grow. Our dahlia here is really nicely in bloom now. It's going to be a shame to see the frost get it. It's put on an amazing display this summer with constant blooming. Here we have celosia of some sort. I forget the name of it. It's quite attractive with these long narrow heads on it. And behind that we've got this autumn joy sedum, I think it is, and the bees and other insects really love this one. Here's a lantana, which is a bush, a tropical bush. Typically here, if people plant them, they just sort of die in the fall, and then you might plant another one the following year. I've actually brought these ones in the house. I've got 2 of these. I've brought them in the house in the fall, and they survive over the winter barely. The leaves get pretty ratty looking and they drop a lot of leaves, but they survive usually, and when I bring them out, so just a couple weeks and they come back to full glory. Here's another type of celosia, quite an attractive one, and one of our nice little fall asters, which I don't think I even planted this year, but it just came up. Now it's in its glory. One of my little cement statues that I paint. This is of a tortoise, so I get these bare concrete and then I paint them with an outdoor exterior acrylic paint. I may do a video on my methods for that too soon. Our potentilla bushes are looking really nice right now. They've come into full bloom. Last year I had a tall plant over this, one of the cup plants that I'll show you shortly. They get 10 feet tall and they didn't like the shade from that, so they're doing a lot better. Here's our Rose of Sharon bush, which actually looks the best it's ever looked as well right now. I put a lot of water on this year, and that helped it, I think, because it's in a fairly dry, sandy place. So here's another garden that I started a couple years ago, and it's looking a bit shabby now with a lot of the plants having died back, coneflowers and whatnot. But here's the second lantana bush that I mentioned earlier. It's in beautiful full bloom right now. I'll have to cover these 2 tonight in case the frost comes. I'd like to keep them as long as I can out here, and then I'll move them inside perhaps. I've got a couple hydrangeas in bloom right now that are looking pretty good. One of these, I forget which one, is called Pinky Winky. And here's some nice small zinnias that are coming into beautiful bloom right now. They've been in bloom for quite a while, but they're looking really nice now. And of course, when we get a heavy frost, they'll be quick to go. Another little aster here. Beautiful mauve color. And my cosmos are just finally coming out. They've taken a long time this year with the drought, but they're finally coming out, and then of course they'll go too as soon as the frost hits them. It's fairly frost sensitive. Here's this big cup plant. It's about 8 feet tall, and it's a perennial. It comes back every year, really tall like this. Has numerous flower heads that you can see some of still remaining here. And the bees and wasps and flies really like it, butterflies as well. It's nice, but it just gets very big and sprawling. So if you put that one in your garden, you want to put it in an isolated place where it can spread out. It also likes full sun. The reason it's called cup plant is you can see these leaves. They go right around the stem, or that's also known as perfoliate leaves, where the leaves are perforated basically. And when it rains, these little the way the leaves join, it's like a cup. So you'll see water sitting in there. Sometimes different creatures will come and drink out of there, birds and insects and whatnot. Here's one of my little Kentucky coffee trees that was grown from seed a few years back. It's about 6 feet tall now. Has these multi-compound leaves. So it drops all these leaves, these big leaves, right back to the main stem. So when this fall comes and these fall off, it'll just be a single stalk here with maybe one branch. They have very few branches when they're young, and then these huge leaves keep dropping off. Here's another annual I really like to plant. It's called Mexican sunflower, or Tithonia torch. We grow these from seed packages basically, or in the fall we collect the seeds right from these heads once they're mature, save them, and then plant them next year inside the house around March. So by May, late May, they're about a foot tall or so when we put them out, and they grow quite rapidly. And by July, mid to late July, they're usually starting to bloom. This year they were late because of the drought again, and some of these tall ones for some reason haven't bloomed, or this one's just starting to bloom now. You can see this one single flower. That's its first flower. Maybe something to do with the drought this year, and yet some of these others have bloomed much earlier, so not sure what that's all about. Here's some remains of California poppies. They're annuals, but they seed themselves fairly easily in this sandy soil here. They have the nice thin leaves of a filigree type nature, bluish green. Just a very pretty plant, especially when it has full bloom going on. Cleome standing tall here. White and mauve. And then pink campion is this shocking pink flower with the white fuzzy foliage. And it's another annual here, and it seeds profusely. Every head has dozens of seeds in it, and especially here with sandy soil, it seeds itself every year. Another garden that I've created just last year, showing the sedum again, autumn joy sedum I think it is. And there's a bumblebee. They really love this stuff. And more Tithonia torch, or Mexican sunflower, all through here. My little griffin statue in cement, painted cement again. I gave this one a faux bronze look, which actually came out pretty well. Happy with that one. And these Mexican sunflowers, as you can see, they have good sized flowers. They're 4 to 5 inches across in most cases. And they bloom profusely right up until the end of the season. They are frost sensitive, so once that hits, they'll be gone. So they could be gone tomorrow. In this little garden I've actually got fenced in because earlier in the summer I had rabbits coming in here and eating these zinnias. This is one of the few zinnias that I managed to protect before the rabbits had chopped the tops off. So here's another one down here. You can see mixed in with cleomes and a magnolia back here, a star magnolia that can survive these zone 4 or 5 areas. More Tithonia torch in the back. And this zinnia is just in beautiful bloom right now with orange and purple heads. Very pretty. Little hosta garden I made last year as well. I went around the countryside and collected these rocks to surround this garden, as well as the one that I just showed you. And this is situated under some red pines that we have that were growing close together. I thought this might be a nice way to do it because I was sort of tired of cutting grass in between these pines. And this way the flowers are growing in there now, so I just have to go around them, go around the one garden instead of around 6 or 7 different pine trees. So as I mentioned, it's mainly hostas of different types. I like to spatter in these begonias. I had some taller varieties last year, which I couldn't find this year, but I find the red and the hostas go very nice together. Last year I had more of the begonias and they look really sharp in here with the hostas. There's also quite a few elderberry wild shrubs that are just sprouting in here. You can see one there, one here, and several back here. And I may have to remove some of those. I might leave some of them in because they do form a nice sort of arching low shrub. But they'll probably get to the point where they'll take over the garden. Nicotiana still flowering in this garden. Wasn't doing too well through most of the summer with the droughts. These green bushy plants are feverfew, which earlier in the summer have masses of small daisy-like flowers, and they get about 3 feet high, and I've just trimmed them back now. The flowering stalks had basically died, so I just trimmed them back, and they come back here. They must be a perennial because they seem to come back. Here's some red salvia, a mauve phlox set in with a bunch of Oswego tea, which is now largely finished. One of the mints or monardas. Nice display of this thin-leaved coneflower, it's called. I'm not sure where this came from. I didn't buy it. It seems to be an annual here, I think, but it seeds itself profusely. So every year lately we've had masses of this, which I really like because it's got these nice little heads, but with a big center button of dark on them, and just about 8 wide rays of flower, yellow flower, which is nice. There's a pretty coneflower, and it gets about 3 to 4 feet tall. You can see here it's just massed right in nicely, and it looks stunning against the backdrop here of these purple turtle heads. I think that looks really sharp. The turtle heads are perennial, and I just put in a stock of those a few years ago, and it spread out to this. So that's kind of neat. But I do like these thin-leaved coneflowers. Garden by our driveway. This was actually created quite early when we moved here. I found all these blocks of landscape blocks that this one building or business was throwing out. So I managed to collect a lot of them. A lot of work, but brought them here, and they don't really fit together all that well, but they sort of form a boundary. So this garden has 4 main areas with walkways between each 4 sections. Here's some marigolds that are finally in bloom. They took a long time here under this big cottonwood tree, so they get a fair amount of shade here, which isn't their preferred situation. Marigolds love the bright sun, full sun, but they've still done well now. Just a matter of how long they can keep going before the frost gets them. Some begonias at the feet of the marigolds. This garden now looks like it's mainly Johnny jump ups, but you can see behind here it's actually mostly marigolds too. This was all short marigolds, and then other things have come in and since taken it over. As you can tell, I don't really manage my gardens necessarily extremely heavily. I do weed them occasionally if they get really severe, but otherwise things are sort of left on their own for the most part. If a different plant comes in that I like, I'll leave it. If I don't like it, I might remove it. But here's some big elephant ears. So these are big house plants, but we put them out in the summer and they get nice and large, and then we'll have to, once the leaves die back in the frost, we have to dig down into the ground and get the tubers out of the ground, bring them in and store them for the winter. And then, so it's like a dahlia or a canna plant, and then you bring them out again next spring, or start them in the house actually early if you can. Here's some mauve salvia. These just seeded themselves last year and have come up again because I didn't plant these this year, and they're an annual plant. Garden by the front of the house, another little garden that was here prior to me building this pergola, and I thought it would just look nice to have the two sort of together, and we got some vines going up the side of the pergola. So this one currently has some red salvia and canna plants, some of this hot pink campion again, more canna plants. The yellow mass here is a perennial plant called Golden Glow, and it's nice, but it can tend to run through your garden and expand quite rapidly. You have to keep it under control or put it in its own garden where it won't run into other things. Here's some white phlox, and in the foreground some Victoria blue salvia, which I think looks really nice against the white phlox. So next year I may try and get a bigger area of white phlox and blue salvia together. And we have our single trumpet vine, which this year actually did bloom quite a bit. You can see some remnants of some blooms here. The flower petals have fallen off, but we've had trouble blooming. This year we decided to keep a lot of the basal leaves trimmed off it, and we've tried to prevent it from coming up elsewhere in the garden, but it's very rampant at sending underground shoots out from different places within the garden, and if that is allowed to happen, it seems to just put on green growth. So this year we cut those back and cut the lower branches off here, off these main vines, and that may have helped to get it to bloom, because we had more blooms this year than we've ever had. So anyhow, that's a little rundown of the gardens in their current state near mid-September, end of September, September 18th I think it is.